Okay, buenos días, estudiantes. I wanted to run over a couple of things from the grammar with some of you that were having some trouble. And I think I'm going to be doing some of this with the vocab sections too, just to pronounce the words for you, and maybe a few other things. But for now, today we are going to go over the grammar stuff that you've been struggling with a little bit. Some of you. The first thing we have in this chapter is on page 100 in our book, which is what we're looking at here. And it's the preterite and the imperfect, el preterito y el imperfecto. We've been talking about both of these in the chapters that we've had up until now. The last few chapters have been talking about the imperfect and how to conjugate it. And before that, we had talked all about the preterite and how to conjugate that. And we learned that they were both past tenses. The preterito and the imperfecto are both past tenses, and there's two of them in Spanish. So now this chapter, we're going to try and decide which one we're going to use. Do we use the preterito or the imperfecto? And if you hear children and stuff in the background, just disregard that. Okay, so this first paragraph here, number one, the choice of whether to use the preterite or imperfect depends upon whether the speaker is describing an action completed in the past or continuous recurrent action in the past, whatever. So the preterite is the first thing I want to talk about, which is what this number 2 here talks about. Okay, so the preterite we'll use for anything that had a specific beginning or ending in the past. And we talked about this in class already. If it's yesterday, or if it's Thursday at 2 o'clock, or if it's last summer, anything that has this specific beginning and ending, we are going to use the preterite for. They give us a couple of examples. This one. Anoche, Carmen fue al supermercado. That's last night, Carmen went to the supermarket. Last night is the key because it makes it a specific time, last night. And then all of these other ones. Compró, puso. All those verbs are going to be conjugated in the preterite because of anoche. So the imperfect, number 3 here. Number 3 talks about the imperfect. It says, use the imperfect to talk about continuous habitual repeated actions in the past. The moment when the action began or ended is unimportant. All right, so anything that doesn't have a specific beginning or ending, things like during the summers, or often, or many times, or habitual things like every week we used to, or every summer, or every Friday, or whatever it happens to be, all of that kind of stuff is going to be conjugated in the imperfect. The preterite endings, the ones we just talked about, are the a, aste, o, almozaron for AR verbs, iste, io, imosieron for ER and IR verbs. The imperfect, those were the ones we just did, which were aba, abas, aba, abamos, aban, and ia, ias, ia, iamos, and ian. You can look those up in the supplemental pages in the book. They're in those folders that you have access to. I have a Dropbox folder now that has all of the books in them, so you can just use that too, which I will put a link to on Planbook here shortly. Anyhow, so the imperfect. It's going to use words like almost always, frequently, that kind of thing. You can see in the examples here, we have con frecuencia on this first one, so it's Carmen iba al supermercado con frecuencia. It's iba because of con frecuencia. Cada día compraba, so there's compraba, necesitaba. Then we have this casi siempre, that means almost always, another imperfect thing. Pagaba is the imperfect form of pagar. So down below, we have kind of two different versions of this. Repeated habitual actions. Ellos iban al cine todos los sábados. Ellos fueron al cine el sábado pasado. So that's every Saturday, last Saturday. Since it's every Saturday, it's iban, right here, iban. Since it's last Saturday, it's fueron. Preterite, imperfect. And then all these verbs, imperfect, preterite, and preterite. So this is always, yesterday, siempre, ayer. Every night, todas las noches, habitual, so it's imperfect. Anoche, last night, so it's preterite, a specific time. Okay, you get the idea there. Moving on to the next page of stuff that we have. There's some, if you get, where are we? Page 101, 102. If you get confused and want some more practice with things, these activities here are a great idea to just review and practice. These are things that we would do in class that I would review with you, usually just out loud, asking you questions. But here they are if you want to do it on your own. When we get to this one, dos acciones en una oración, right here. Dos acciones en una oración on page 103. A sequence of events. Sometimes there are going to be two verbs in a sentence, like they see in number 1, these yellow ones right here. Say number 1, there's llegó and vio. Both of these verbs are in the preterite. I was giving you a chance to think about it there for a minute and maybe answer on your own at home. Let's see. What do I want to talk about here? Oh, yeah. So both of these verbs are in the preterite. Down here, number 2, both these verbs are in the perfect. Iba, trabajaba. You'll run across this from time to time when there are two different verbs in a sentence, but they're both conjugated the same way, either in the preterite or the imperfect. Sometimes, though, like on number 3, you will have a verb in the imperfect and then a verb in the preterite, and they're in the same sentence. This happens because the imperfect used for describing background events, setting the scene for what you're going to talk about, and the preterite used for the specific thing that happened. So what we have here is estudiaba, which is to study, entrar, which is to enter. Estudiaba is what's going on when someone enters. So someone's studying when someone enters. Yo estudiaba cuando Julia entró. The studying is going on, it's the background stuff, and then someone entering, it interrupts the ongoing action, so it's in the preterite. You have something that's going on, some background thing, and then someone interrupts that, or something interrupts that. The thing that interrupts it's in the preterite. The ongoing thing is in the imperfect. Okay. The last thing, well, there's one thing before the last thing, I forgot. So on page 105 here, we have verbs, querer, creer in the past, and other verbs like desear, tener ganas de, and over here, pensar, preferir, poder, saber. All of these are mental processes, which it says right here, mental processes. Verbs that deal with mental activities. These will almost always be in the imperfect. So they give us some examples. Él sabía que preferíamos. It's he knew that what we preferred. Yo tenía ganas de salir. Ganas de is to feel like, so it's I felt like leaving. Él creía que yo estaba enfermo. He thought that I was sick. He believed that I was sick. So all those that deal with thinking, feeling, wanting, being able to, knowing, all that kind of stuff in the past, almost always is going to be in the imperfect and not in the preterite. So it'll be the ias and the abas and those kinds of things. Okay, the last thing that we have to go over, which is probably the one that's confusing the most of you, is the passive voice. This passive voice right here on page 106. The passive voice, where it says in number 1, we're going to talk about something being done and not saying who's actually doing that thing that's being done. So an example that we have that I do in English is, well, they give the one here. Fish is sold at the fish market. That doesn't say who's actually doing the selling. If you said, the other way of doing that is saying Bob sells fish at the fish market. That says Bob sells it. This passive voice doesn't say that. It just says fish is sold. By who? Who knows? Anyone could be selling it, but fish is sold. That's what the passive voice does. So in Spanish, when we do this, instead of saying Bob vende pescado, we're going to do it a little differently to say fish is sold. The subject of fish is sold is not the person selling it anymore. It's the thing being sold. So the verb is always going to be in the third person. Either for AR verbs, it'll have an A or an AN on the end of it, or for ER and IR verbs, it'll have an E or an EN, like vender, it'd be vende or venden. For hablar, it'd be habla or hablan. That's it. It can't be hablamos or hablo or any of those other things. It'll be in the third person. And you have to use the little pronoun se out in front to make this thing reflexive. So what you end up with is you end up with the verb vender, and it's vende in this case. Se vende pescado en la pescadería. So se goes out in front of it. You have to use the se, and then vende or venden. One of the two. Vende, venden, either with the E or the EN. And what determines that is the thing that's being sold. In this one, it's se vende pescado, so fish is sold at the fish store. Pescado is singular, it's not plural. So because it's singular, it's fish is sold, vende. If you have something plural, like potatoes, then it's venden, because potatoes are sold. Se venden papas en la verdulería. So that's how you do the passive voice. You use the se, this little pronoun se, put it out there first, and then conjugate your verb in the third person, either with just an e or an en, or if it's an ar verb, an a or an an, depending on the thing being sold, if it's singular or plural. I think in the workbook, they give you things to do to change this. They will say, the people sell whatever it is in the whatever store, and you have to change that to the passive voice. To do that, you take the people out of it that are doing the selling, and you just have the thing that's being sold, and you decide if it's singular or plural, and you put the verb out in front of it with say in front of that. So say, and then the verb, either singular or plural for the verb, and then the thing that's being sold and where it's being sold, and you leave the person completely out of it. There's some examples here with hablar too. Spanish. Aquí se habla español. So that Spanish is spoken here. By who? Who knows? But that's the point of the passive voice. You aren't saying who actually does it. I think that should clear things up for most of you. And then we're going into the culture section. That should clear things up with the grammar, I hope. At least it's a brief explanation, a little better than reading it yourself. If you still have questions, send me an email, or you can comment in the video. I'll check both of those places. Sometimes commenting in the video might be good, because then I can give a little longer explanation, and everyone, or not a longer explanation, but then an explanation that everyone can see. So either way is fine. Anyways, that's it for today. Hasta luego.